My name is Bruce Hawtin, and I'm with Hawtin, Jorgensen Architects in Jackson, Wyoming.
How long have you been working in architecture?
43 years, and I've been in Jackson for 45 of those years. So I worked for two other firms, and then I went on my own in 1971.
What made you become an architect?
As far as I can remember back, and that's a long way for me, I have always been interested in buildings, even as a teenager. I loved looking at buildings in magazines and newspapers and looking at floor plans and sections. I've always been fascinated with the three-dimensional aspects of buildings. So it was logical that I would become an architect. There was no other influence than that.
What drives you to continue to work in architecture?
Well, it is a very dynamic, challenging, and rewarding profession. Because when you end up what you're doing, you have a building, for better or for worse. And so I enjoy going to work every day still and designing buildings for clients. It's fun, it's challenging. You have clients to satisfy, you have building codes, you have site conditions, you have budgets, you have the construction industry to work with. So it's a many-faceted profession, and it takes, I think, a certain amount of skills to successfully be an architect.
What advice do you have for young architecture students?
I think if you're a high school student, if you're interested in anything creative, like pottery or painting or sketching, if you're not, you could expose yourself to those kinds of classes in high school if they have them. I think also architecture has been described as the art and science of building. The art portion of it is pretty obvious, sketching. Going to galleries and looking at art, going to museums and looking at artwork, statues, silverware, anything that's artistic, that's creative. Expose yourself to all those disciplines. The science portion of it is math and science. If you can expose yourself to some math courses, if it's not too painful, because there's a lot of engineering that goes into the practice of architecture. And also science courses like biology, like physics, chemistry. I mean, it takes those kinds of disciplines to be an architect. You don't have to be a straight A student in all those disciplines, but you should be exposed to those classes, that creative aspect, to prepare yourself to going to an architecture school.
Where can someone get a degree in architecture in the state of Wyoming?
You cannot get an architectural degree in Wyoming. As our only four-year college, the University of Wyoming does not offer an accredited architectural degree. So you have to go out of state. But there are over 100 schools of architecture in the United States. And the University of Wyoming has a cooperative agreement with a lot of architectural schools that at a certain point in your curriculum, the state of Wyoming will pick up the difference between the in-state and the out-of-state tuition. So you can get an in-state tuition by going out of state to get an architectural degree at an accredited School of Architecture. Montana State University, University of Idaho, University of Colorado are the closest one, University of Nebraska, but there are many choices of accredited schools of architecture.
Does the AIA provide any scholarships for students?
Yes, the Wyoming chapter of the AIA has a scholarship committee that they solicit funds from architects, from builders, from people associated with the building industry, and they have a pool of money. They interview high school students that have been accepted to a School of Architecture somewhere, and there's scholarship money available through AIA Wyoming.
How long does it take to become an architect?
Once you graduate from an accredited accredited high school, a legitimate high school, then you have a 5-year curriculum in college. After you complete that successfully, then you have an apprenticeship of 3 years. Now you can take part of your licensing exam during that 3-year period, but after 3 years you complete your exam process, and at that point you can call yourself an architect, but not until you complete high school, accredited university, School of Architecture, and your exam. And the exam is a tough exam, there's no question about it. but it's all worth it because at the end, you're an architect.
What are the exams like?
There's 7 portions of the exam, and you can take it over. You don't have to sit for it, all 7 at one time. You can spread it out. You go to a testing center, and the closest one, I think there is one in Casper. Where I'm from in Jackson, you go to Idaho, and you take 1 or 2 or 3 at a time, and you can spread that over a period of time. There's a limit to how long you can postpone taking. I think it's like 5 years. You have to complete all those sections within 5 years. And there's study guides and opportunities to prepare. Besides going to school, you have other study guides you can prepare for.
What are the most significant changes that have happened in the industry since you've been in practice?
I think the advent of the computer has had a huge impact on the profession of architecture and will continue to have as we become more computerized and get into 3D modeling and all those things that contractors and architects are involved with. I think the biggest impact is that people in the United States don't really understand what architects do for a living. And we need to promote the practice of architecture, not only what we do, but how we do it. Because there are a lot of developers now that have their own architectural staffs, whether they're licensed architects or not. They're doing design build, where they buy property, their staff designs a building, then they build it and sell it, and they bypass the profession somewhat when they do that. So I think that's a threat to the profession. But computers and being in tune with what's going on out in the marketplace is key to the future of architects and the practice of architecture.
How is practicing architecture in the state of Wyoming unique?
The practice of architecture in Wyoming is very unique, there's no question about it. We have a small population. We don't do high-rise buildings very often, and sometimes even if there is a high-rise building, it will go out of state to other architects who do those kinds of buildings on a regular basis. We have smaller projects, smaller scale, smaller communities, hospital districts, school districts, and so forth. So the scale of our work is smaller, but the challenges are there anyway. We have some very unique sites, budgets, clients, and it's a challenge here as it is in Las Vegas or New York City. It's just smaller scale and different people that we're working with. In Jackson Hole, where I practice, we have some very sophisticated clients from all over the United States. And that happens throughout Wyoming occasionally, but a lot in Jackson Hole. So we're unique. The practice here is unique compared to other places in the United States.
Who are your favorite architects?
I have 2 dead architects that are my favorites. One is Frank Lloyd Wright. The other is Alvar Aalto. Alvar Aalto is a Finnish architect. And if you ever have the opportunity to look up his work, he's been dead many years. His work is so Finnish, as in Finland. And his work is so, it's designed for Finland and their climate and their attitude and altitude and so forth. It's fresh, it's new, even though it's 30, 40, 50 years old. Some of the best designs in the world came from Finland and from Alvar Aalto. Frank Lloyd Wright would be my favorite American architect. He died in 1959, so he hasn't been around for a while. He was way ahead of his time in his buildings. In the 20s and 30s and 40s, he was doing buildings that were so beautiful, timeless. There are 2 words that describe architecture for me. One is trendy. That's a negative word. It's almost plagiarism. It's copying what's currently voguish and is in all the magazines. That's trendy. Timeless are buildings that are just as beautiful 5, 10, 20, 30 years as they were the day they were built. I think we're obligated as architects to build and design timeless buildings, and that is a real special challenge.
Is there anything else you'd like to add about the profession of architecture?
Only that it's a great way to make a living, because as I said before, when you're finished, you end up with a building. We were born in a building, chances are we'll die in a building. All of our lives, we spend the great majority of our time in buildings. Those buildings need to be safe, energy efficient, sustainable, with good lighting, with good colors, textures, forms, exciting buildings that we're excited to be in. And we as human beings function better in an environment that we enjoy and that brings out the best in all of us. And as an architect, that's what the challenge is.